Hello. So if you've been keeping up with this autobiography video series that I'm doing, I think you call it a vlog. I'm kind of going over the interesting paranormal and spiritual experiences that I've had throughout my life, of which there are many. And mentioned a couple times that there's a bit of a gap in time between when I was very young and when I was in my early 20s. And in my early 20s, kind of embraced spiritualism manually, you could say. It's not like when I met my twin flame and it was by force. It's your consciousness explodes. Your soul says, it's fucking time. And there's the dark night of the soul, the ego death. And it's very painful, but then it ends up being the best thing that's ever happened to you. So this, in my early 20s, was when I kind of, I always knew it was something that I was attracted to, and I just embraced it. And it did enhance my life. And I'll talk a little bit about that in this video. But primarily what I'd like to focus on is going to be what happened between when I was a little kid and in my early 20s when I embraced spiritualism that way. And just in case you missed the other videos, there's a playlist that I made called Kurt's Spiritual Autobiography or something like that. If you want to go to the playlists menu, if you're curious, there's a whole video I did about the time that I was visited by physical angels when I was 4, twice, and they left me physical evidence that I hung on to for years. And then when I was about 4 years old, I also had an out-of-body experience, and I did a whole video about telepathy. I've got evidence for that too, physical evidence, all the weird ghost stories. It's all in that playlist by now. So I'm just going to kind of fill in the gaps in this video. There's some pretty interesting experiences. And things being revealed to me. And I was still pretty young when a lot of these things were revealed to me. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And there was even a time when I almost died, but something very interesting happened. And I was milliseconds from death. So we're going to talk about that story today. So yeah, let's get started. So first, if you're new here, if you didn't know this, I've got something going on over here. If you're not looking at your screen, take a look real quick. This is a place where you can watch videos just like here, where you're watching this video, right? Same name, New World All-Star. All-Star is one word, ALLSTAR. And I've got a nice little stash of videos over here that you can check out. And my plan is to start a community, a New Earth community, potentially in-person community, where we can be safe and protected from the certain destruction that is headed towards humanity right now. A place where we can live in peace and prosperity. And that's my end game of this side project. So go check me out over there if you'd like to join us. Now, to my story. So I'm just going to say this about when I was very young, little Kurt, 4 years old, 5 years old. And this is something that you hear spiritual people always say. And to someone that doesn't have the experiences that we've had and felt the energies that we've felt, this is going to sound like gobbledygook or hyperbole or, I don't know. I don't know, maybe even arrogant to some people. They're going to think we're just trying to make ourselves sound special or something. They're going to put a bunch of labels on you. They're going to hang a bunch of signs. They're going to try to hang a sign on you. And that's fine. I don't feel any resentment, you know. I just kind of accept that that's a fact of life here on earth. But here's the saying. It's that you just kind of know you're different. And not in a miscreant, misanthrope kind of way, but just like you don't belong here or something. And I'm sure almost all you watching, you know what I'm talking about. And I think there's probably a reason for that. You know, Dolores Cannon, a lot of the stuff she talks about, I can't quite swallow. But there is one major contribution that she made, which is pretty impressive. And I think she deserves accolades for it. And I definitely hold her in high regard for having done this. And that would be the sessions where she would hypnotize people. And for some reason, she attracted people to her that would all tell the same kind of story about the three waves and how there's a spiritual hierarchy overseeing the evolution of the human consciousness. And we split the atom much sooner than they ever thought we would. We unlocked that beast sooner than they ever thought we would. And we were developing rockets. It's not a good combination. And, you know, it's one that could mean to complete destruction, one that means, or what was I trying to say? One where we're leading ourselves to certain destruction. And that's pretty bad, even for the cosmic community we live in. You know, it could affect things. There could be ripples if that was to happen. And, you know, the cosmic community and the spiritual hierarchy, it would affect them negatively. It's not necessary. You know, it's just kind of a bad idea to let humans do that. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to send down souls who are advanced spiritually as volunteers to assist in raising the consciousness of Earth and averting certain disaster, averting destruction. And that's kind of what this is all about. And this side project that I told you about earlier, because I've kind of cracked the code on human biology and how humans seem to be unique. Earth is a unique place, for sure. And I haven't really gotten into that over here yet, but I will. Anyway, you know, we supposedly were sent here from distant star systems and the like. And of course, everybody in the spiritual community thinks that they are one of these. And probably most are. But, well, I've kind of spoken about this before. You got to watch out. You know, I've talked about the New Age movement. I won't beat that dead horse here in this video. You know, I made a whole entire, like, 2+ hour long live stream on my YouTube channel. If you want to go check that out, it's called New Age Spiritualism, where I explain the fact that there are infiltrators in the spiritual community. And a lot of them, they don't even realize that's what they're doing. Well, anyway, needless to say, there are many, many of these people who are legit, who have come from somewhere, perhaps other star systems. I don't know if anybody really knows. Again, you can. My advice to you, if you want to know more about what I'm talking about, just go watch Dolores Cannon interviews about the three waves. Greg Braden's got a really good excerpt on his YouTube channel that you could go check out. You could just type in Greg Braden, Dolores Cannon. And yeah, she did this kind of hypnotic regression with, I don't even know how many people, you guys. I'm pretty sure it's in the dozens or possibly hundreds. It's been a minute since I read up on her, but when I read it, I was like, what the hell? Because she kept getting the same answer from everybody. And it was a bunch of people. I think it was hundreds. Just so many people. She was busy. And they all told the same story. We came down here in three waves to save the human race, to save humanity, without violating the free will of the human race. So it's kind of like sending foot soldiers from within. And, you know, I don't know, man. You're born here. You know you're different. And that's that. I don't know if anything else needs to be said about that. I never, when I was a kid, I never really felt like I belonged here, ever. Yeah. And even a kid is going to try to use coping mechanisms. I wasn't the most social kid ever. What I really wanted to do was play Legos and listen to oldies when I was a kid. That's what I did. They had the little oldies station here on the FM dial in the 1980s. And I would build some pretty impressive shit with my Legos. Like 5 or 6 years old, I was engineering all this amazing mechanical shit. And my parents were like, oh my God, like, what? He's really smart. And I ended up, later in school, I would end up in like accelerated learning programs, and I would always be at the apex. And school was still a struggle for me because I was really focused on the subjects that I liked, and then I didn't even bother with the subjects that I didn't like. I didn't like school. I did not like school. I was tormented when I was a kid too. The bullies, I was the bottom of the totem pole kid in school, right? And yeah, I was subjected to bullying from pretty much everybody. I was kind of a nerdy little kid, you know. I liked science. Picture me, 5, 6 years old, reading books and learning about science and space travel and taking an interest in engineering. My parents put me in Cub Scouts, and it was okay. It was just another have to kind of thing. I didn't like the other kids there. They didn't like me. I was the dorky kid that they didn't like. I was always just out of place. I never fit in. And there's always been people like that, but I guess unless you were me, you wouldn't maybe know what I'm talking about. Or perhaps if you were a spiritual person, right? Which is, when you really get what spiritualism is, it's kind of an oxymoronic thing to say I'm spiritual, right? It's kind of, because you can't label it. It's not an identity, spiritual. But I don't know what else to call it. Someone who is aware that they are the awareness, right? Okay, so instead of saying I'm spiritual, I'll say I'm aware that my true nature is that I am eternal, formless awareness. I am consciousness. I am essence, right? Well, anyway, so that was always there. And I would do other things to try to numb the pain, like watch television. Now, this is relevant because I watched TV like a son of a gun. That's all I wanted to do was play Legos, listen to my oldies, watch cartoons, and read books. That's all I did when I was a kid. I didn't like sports. I couldn't stand PE at all. I didn't want to join sports. I didn't really want to be in Cub Scouts. I didn't want to do anything, And I would find some of these things were coping mechanisms like television. And even Legos to a degree. I would just kind of do the same things over and over and over again with what I did with my Legos, if that makes any sense to you. It was always the same things. If I wasn't in the mood for reading or learning about science or something, and there wasn't like a great library either where I was. I grew up in the country. It's a couple hundred people living in the town that I grew up in. Little tiny town. Big cornfield across the street. There's the Colorado Rockies way off in the distance. It was pretty, but nothing to do. I would find science books in school, 7 years old, 9 years old, reading about all that stuff. And there was one time I ordered a book. There was a book club, and it was like $5 for a book or something. And I got one, and my teacher, this was 5th grade, she saw the book I ordered, and she was like, "Are you sure you want this book? It's kind of advanced, I think, for your age group." And she was really nice about it. She wasn't like condescending or anything at all. She was a very nice lady, and she was just concerned, and she was very kind. But I told her, yeah, I'm sure. And I went home and I read it, and it all made sense to me. And, other teachers would see the what's going on with me. I think my mom actually told me this once. She said, if you'd have been in grade school in the mid to late 90s, your teachers probably would have advised me to put you on one of those, like ADHD meds or something like that. Or, maybe you're like borderline autistic or something. And then as I grew into adulthood, it became clear that, nothing could have been further from the truth. There's nothing wrong with me, except maybe spiritually, because later in life, I joined the workforce, I got a job, I had 2 jobs, I tried starting a business, I worked really hard. Every job I've ever had, I went straight to the top. The boss always wanted to promote me right away. I was always I guess an overachiever. When I saw something that I really wanted to do or needed to do, I would just do it full on. And paying the bills, you kind of need to do that. So I would work really hard and excel at every job I ever had. Everything is like super easy for me. I've just got this higher cognitive function. And some of my teachers in the younger years, so going back to the younger years, like grade school, they would see it. And and they would offer me things, you know. And then other teachers, they thought that I was just kind of a slack job with a bad attitude or something, you know, a burnout. But that was never it. And I didn't have a bad attitude. It's just that I wasn't a jock playing sports. I was a dorky, nerdy kid that wore button-up shirts, and I had a funny haircut. And because, you know, my mom cut my hair at home and stuff. We didn't have a lot of money. So my parents just kind of did the best they could. But, you know, I don't know. Adults are kind of funny like that sometimes, right? Well, anyway, no, I just kind of kept to myself. I was quiet. I didn't like school. I knew I was different. I didn't fit in. Ever. Didn't have a lot of friends. There was one friend down the street. We ended up being besties, which was strange because he was a popular kid, but he was 2 grades behind me. So he didn't have any idea that I was universally hated by my classmates just because I was dorky, right? That's why they didn't like me, is because I was dorky. And, interesting. It's so weird because being dorky is something that I outgrew in my teens and 20s and fast. And then I ended up being well-liked and popular and even easily getting attention from females. So I don't know. You know, maybe there's an ugly duckling story in there too. But anyway, childhood experiences, there were many Satori moments. Those of you that know what that is, it was something that was always there with me for when I was really super young. And then it would come and go the older I got, you know, approaching maybe puberty. You know, you get up into like 10, 11, 12 years old, and it would just be spotty. I was fascinated with space travel, with astronomy. My dad had a telescope, and it was a pretty simple telescope, but good enough where you could see the craters on the moon really well, and you could see the rings of Saturn, and you could see the great red spot on Jupiter. And that was one of my favorite things to do, was to look at things through the telescope. I would look at star clusters. I would learn about astronomy, engineering, space travel, you know, 9, 10 years old. That's what I was doing. Now, 11, 12 years old, right before puberty, all of the sudden, I didn't want to watch television anymore. And remember, I carried with me always this sense of peace when I was a kid, little kid, single-digit ages, but feeling out of place. And I would try to fill the void with coping mechanisms like television and repetitive things with toys that I had, and, you know, stuff like that, right? And I would doodle and draw pictures. I would draw like really detailed pictures of spacecraft, and they looked like engineering drawings. And my dad, I even had one of those special rulers, scale ruler, and my dad would see what I was doing, and he's an engineer. He would see what I was doing, and he'd be like, "You drew that," you know. But it would get repetitive, and television was a big coping mechanism. I watched copious amounts of television, cartoons, old TV shows, Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy. Um, there was also The Price is Right. I really liked The Price is Right with Bob Barker. Make sure you get your pet spayed or neutered, right? The car is going to conform to California emissions controls. And I really liked the one where there was the big wheel with all the sparkly numbers on it, all the dollar amounts. Oh, and I liked the yodeling one too. That one was good. The yodeler guy that climbed up the mountain. Anyway, that was a good show. But also like lots of cartoons. I would get up like just so eager. Like Saturdays were like the happiest day ever because I didn't have to go to school. I get out of bed early. I would never want to get out of bed early, but I got out of bed early on Saturday because I couldn't wait to watch cartoons and just be a couch potato and watch cartoons and just get like the big bowl of cereal and, that's all I wanted to do was watch TV, sometimes. Lots and lots and lots of television. And television commercials, oh my goodness, television commercials, you wouldn't even believe. And I watched them all because you kind of had to sometimes. But at the same time, it was interesting because later, when I was a teenager, I started to grow suspicious of advertising. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But I watched so much damn television. And by the time I was 11 or 12, right before puberty, I was probably 11 because I was early. 10 or 11. Yeah, 10 or 11. I just stopped watching television. And it was weird because it was like the calm before the storm. I just lost interest in television completely. And I just wanted to listen to classical music. And my sister, she has pretty doggone good taste in music. And so she turned me on to some like good modern music, right? Depeche Mode and Excess. Echo and the Bunnymen, just to name a few. I mean, those were the relevant musical acts at the time. And, they've been recognized as kind of pushing the envelope, those types of artists, just kind of the genre that she would listen to of music. So I got into music. And like I said, this little 1 year period was like the calm before the storm. I just didn't want to watch TV anymore. I just didn't care. I just wanted to go outside and go for walks and listen to music. And I would start going for walks around my little town for hours and hours at night, listening to music. And that's all I wanted to do was just be alone. And then puberty happened, and oh my fucking God. So I don't know, maybe my soul was preparing me for the physical changes, because when the hormones kick in, you just lose your shit, and it's just balls to the walls attitude and like rebelling against your parents. And I started listening to hardcore gangster rap. I was the first kid on my block with a copy of Ice Cube, the Ghetto Boys, and I was listening to the really hard stuff. In a little cow town, by the way. It was the early 90s, when that stuff was starting to get really popular. But I don't know, maybe my soul was like, he's going to have to go through this little phase of bullshit because the body changes and you're just going to have to deal with it, dude. Because over time, when you're a teenager, the hormones go, "Woot," and then over time they start to kind of level off and stabilize as you get into your 20s. But it's a trip being a teenager. And I liken it to that one episode of Star Trek where the original Star Trek, where Spock is like losing his fucking mind. He's losing his shit all of a sudden one day for no reason. And he begs Kirk to take him back to Vulcan. And I don't remember how he got back to Vulcan. If he like commandeered the ship or if he somehow worked it out where he could go back there. But whatever it was like a hormonal thing, for a Vulcan. Like the Vulcan is going through like puberty or something, and they have to go back and get married and mate or something like that, right? I kind of vaguely remember the episode, but Spock was like violent and he would like attack people savagely and all this, and like throw himself on the ground and be like, oh, and shit like that. I mean, I didn't do any of that stuff, but it's an analogy. It's like that. And it's weird because I went from being so calm to being, a teenager. And, that's what happens for every teenager. Nothing new under the sun there. But teenage years really sucked. So getting into high school, high school was interesting. The bullying at school culminated in 7th grade, and that was middle school. And then 9th grade was my first year of high school. And it was weird because the first day of high school, I noticed nobody cares. Even the kids that bullied me in middle school, middle school was the worst. That was like the peak of the getting bullied, and middle school was horrible. Wow. And I literally could just be sitting there minding my own business, and they would just like attack me, kick me, throw spit wads at me just for existing. But high school, my first day of high school, it was so weird because it just stopped. Nobody cared anymore. Now, high school, the bullying, if you can call it that, it takes on a different dynamic because all the kids in high school, they split off into cliques. And I hung out with the stoners. I didn't really do that a lot, at least not until later. But, I don't know. The burnouts, right? And depression peaked at 17. Yeah. Yeah, I was pretty depressed. Well, anyway, one of my friends, we're still friends, they kind of gave me a loving tongue lashing one day. And I don't know, maybe it was the right person at the right time, but I kind of said, yeah, they're right. And pulled myself up by the bootstraps enough to make sure to graduate high school the next year when I was a senior. And it's interesting because by the time I had graduated high school, I had pulled myself out of the funk for the most part. Junior year, I dropped out of all these classes. So this is when I was 17, and that was like peak burnout, peak depression, peak bad attitude. I didn't do anything. I never attacked anybody. I wasn't ever the aggressor. It was just being a burnout, you know. When I say bad attitude, I didn't want to do anything. And and that was that. I would cut class all the time, and I was, listening to a lot of, I don't know, Nine Inch Nails, Marilyn Manson, and stuff like that, and KMFDM, which I still like KMFDM. I like all those bands, but I don't really listen to that much anymore. Uh, it's too dark for me to listen to anymore. But anyway, yeah, by the next year, senior year, it was like I went through the 0 point or something, and I felt pulled in a new direction at 18. And it kind of started to work out. The depression lingered, but what's interesting is it was at this time, as I was kind of, it's like I passed through the 0 point of being a teenager, and then it was moving out into the rest of my life from that point. I had to go through this furious pubescent period in my life. And once I came out of it, it's like I came out of a spell or a trance, and I started having all of these interesting revelations when I was like late 17, going into 18 years old. Definitely in my senior year in high school, 18, 19 years old, I started to be given information about spiritual concepts, like where emotions come from, or I started to pursue this question of what is consciousness? 18, I was thinking about this stuff, or like how feelings are in some way affected by what your soul is doing, where they come from. And what's interesting is, where is this information coming from? Or this desire to explore sacred geometry. And I didn't even know that's what I was doing. So by the time I was 19, I moved out of my parents' house. Things happened fast. And I would just sit and just draw. I don't know why. Well, now I know why, right? But at the time, I didn't know why I wanted to do this so bad. I would draw parallels between, for example, the musical scale and human chakras, which for obvious reasons. And I would, God, I threw this notebook out when I was mad one day. Oh, I wish I still had it. Ha! Son of a gun. I threw this notebook out, and it was, my light's about to fall over. It was about this thick. It was a green spiral, or like a binder that I had with just random papers, just filled with papers of drawings that I made of what I now understand to be sacred geometry. And it was like I just channeled it or something. I would do some of this, because it's Colorado, okay? I would do that, and then all this shit would fucking start flowing through me, and I'd be there with my scientific calculator, right? Texas Instruments scientific calculator, and my engineering ruler, and I would make engineering drawings of all these different shapes. And I started reading about the music of the spheres. Like, the longer that I studied this, I think I just kind of drew that book to me one day. I was in the library, and I saw that book on a shelf, and I was like, that's interesting. And I opened it up, and I was like, oh, because it was all of this stuff that I had been channeling. I drew all these diagrams, and I'd been doing it for months. And my roommate, even at the time, was like, I don't understand what you're doing. And you'll think this is interesting. I also had this sense that future Kurt was communicating with present Kurt somehow. I was 19, 20 years old when all of this was going on. And it was like a thing. I was like obsessed with it. My girlfriend at the time couldn't understand it. And I would also do things like take the periodic table of elements and try to find if there's some kind of a sacred geometry structure to it. Another thing that I did was to plot out prime numbers. I got a bunch of graph paper and I taped them all end to end. And it must have been 50 feet long, where I drew like in each square where there was a prime number, I would fill it in dark to see if there's a geometrical pattern to prime numbers. And I would try making shapes out of the roll of paper to see if maybe they connect in some kind of a higher dimension. 19 years old, to see if they connect in a higher dimension. And I don't even, at the time, I didn't know why I wanted to do this so bad. And almost all of the stuff that I would write, the drawings that I would make, were just coming out straight out of my imagination. I would get a ruler, I would get my engineering ruler, so I would make scale drawings, and I would start with the musical scale, or a pyramid, or the periodic table of elements. And it would branch off, especially the musical scale. It would branch off into all these different directions mathematically. I can't even describe it all to you, where it would go mathematically. But now I've come to understand that a lot of it was numerology and sacred geometry. And then when I found, this went on for almost a year, then I found a copy of The Music of the Spheres, and that just exacerbated it in a good way, right? Because now it was like the universe was helping me. It's like I'm hot on the trail. And also at this time, I started to listen to Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM, when it was still on the AM dial, right? And every night I would stay up late, listen to that show. And there was one show in particular where he had a guy who claimed to have built an alien spacecraft engine, which sounds extremely over the top, insane, dubious as hell. Like, okay, buddy. But the thing is he was visited by black suits. There were witnesses that saw the thing fly. I don't know. I wasn't there. It could be complete BS. Who knows? But, he had a book. He wrote about it. And I looked at the design and I said, well, I mean, this is probably bogus. This is probably complete baloney. And I still kind of think it is. But at the same time, it followed certain geometric patterns that made sense to me. And, it was just lots of mental hyperbole. This whole period of my life, just all of these different weird fucking things I was looking at. And it was kind of like a dream where almost all of it, like 99% of it, is just a bunch of stuff. It's like a junk drawer. That's another thing that I got into was dream analysis, dream interpretation. I know a lot about that. And the fact is, most dreams are just kind of the exhaust system of your mind. But there are diamonds in the rough. There are nuggets in there that'll tell you a lot about who you are subconsciously. And maybe a lot of this stuff was that, but at the same time, it was kind of like I was working a muscle that I didn't know I had. And there was a lot of truth in there too. That's why I'm so bummed that I threw out the notebook. Why did I do that? Or maybe I just misplaced it. Oh well. Very interesting. God. It was just I would get maps. I would get geological maps and look for patterns in the land. They had a store in a nearby town that sold geological maps. It was like a map specialty store. And they had USGS survey maps where you could get topographical, this is before the internet, right? You can get topographical maps. And I would overlay sacred geometry onto them because I grew up in a pretty interesting part of Colorado, which has some very unique energy. I'm just going to leave it at that. But just things like this. Another thing that happened, the time that I almost died. Oh my fucking God. I was probably 19 or 20. And I slept on my girlfriend's couch. She still lived with her parents. And I don't remember what we were doing. I don't know. We probably stayed up late. And fell asleep on her couch. I drove home in the morning. And, it's like 6 in the morning. Sun's just barely coming up. And I'm driving east. It's a 2-lane highway, right? And double line. And there's a hill, so you can't see what's over the hill. And there's a pickup truck going real slow. No, it was a Subaru. That's a thing in Colorado. People that drive Subaru hatchbacks, no hate if you drive a Subaru hatchback, but they drive really slow. And everybody makes fun of them because they drive like so-and-sos. Anyway, they're really bad. They always got to be going 10 miles under the speed limit. They're always camping out in the left-hand lane. It's always a Subaru. Anyway, I got behind one of these guys and, I'm going, it's 6 in the morning. There's not going to be anybody coming. There's a hill. You can't see over the hill. There could be somebody coming. It's double line in the middle, so you can't pass because you can't see over the hill. If you pass the person in front of you and there's a car over the hill, you're going to die. But I said, well, it's only 6 in the morning. Right? Fucking 19 years old. So guess what I did? Yeah, I tried to pass the Subaru, and guess what happened? There was a big semi-truck headed right at me. And there was not time to fix it. I did not have time to hit the brake and then get back behind the Subaru. There was not time to do that. Now you're going, well, what happened, Kurt? Well, I didn't die because I'm making this video, right? But before I tell you what happened, or how I got out of it, right? I just want to say that I was literally 1/2 of a second from instant death. Like, I would have been killed instantly. I'm going 60. The truck is going 60. Big semi-truck, and I'm in a little car. I had a little 1982 Ford Mustang. And, or maybe I had the Honda. I don't know. It was a little car. But I was literally less than a second from death. I would have been killed. I would have just been smashed I mean, I had to be 10 feet from the truck. Oh my God. Now, here's what's interesting about this. So the truck, he veered into the shoulder. He saw me and he veered like instantly, like, oh shit, into the shoulder and honked his horn. That was so stupid. Oh my God. Stupidest thing anybody's ever done. Okay. Well, anyway. Fuck, I could have died. Oh my God. Anyway, um, what's interesting about this is you would think right before the semi truck veered away, or you could say right before the semi truck impacted and killed me, because I thought that's what was going to happen. I mean, I didn't even have time to think about it. Anyway, in that moment, you would think that I would have been like, oh my God, I would have been like all terrified and shit, screaming, No, that's not what happened. Instead, I was completely overcome with an intense sense of deep peace. Deeper than any Satori I've ever experienced. Like enlightenment level peace. Probably because my soul was about to leave its body permanently. You know what I'm saying? Hmm. And it would have been quick. Oh my God. Well, anyway, so that happened, but it was an interesting internal experience. Now, the cortisol, the chemical reaction of the body, that came after. And I finished passing the car and I took my dickhead ass home. And now I drive really good. I make sure to drive good. Ever since then. I think I've only ever made like one kind of bad mistake after that. That was it. And that time it was an honest mistake. Well, anyway. Man, that was stupid. But interesting spiritual experience nonetheless. Now, this pretty much sums up what I wanted to tell you about this interesting time period. I was channeling information about, just from nowhere, about sacred geometry and stuff. There was also, like, somewhere between 17 and 18, I started channeling stuff about, like, just out of nowhere, I would just get this intrusive thought in my head about chakras or something. Or, the soul is consciousness. It would just come to me. I would just go, oh yeah, that's what it is. Right? And I would just know that. I was like a senior in high school and I was thinking about this kind of stuff. And it would just come to me and I just knew it was truth. How? Well, now I know how. And again, there was also when I left my house and I started channeling all the weird sacred geometry stuff and writing on all the papers and maps and stuff, there was this knowing that future Kurt was communicating with myself at the present when I was like 20. I just knew it. I was being given all this information. And now I understand why. And that's a thing, by the way. Like what you're doing now can affect your past. Isn't that something? Which kind of says that you don't have free will, but you do. It's all one thing. You're all creating it all at once. Linear time is an illusion, and this is something that's come full circle now that I'm here doing this, right? Well, anyway, guys, I think that's enough for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you found this entertaining. I'll see you later.